Good morning, BYW students. Mr. O'Sullivan. Today we are beginning our first lesson of our first unit. And I'm just going to give you a little intro about our first unit. It's called the building blocks of algebra, and that's just a fancy way of saying we're going to be doing some of the stuff we covered over the past 3 years in middle school. So some of this stuff is from 6th grade, some of it's from 7th grade, but a good chunk of it is from 8th grade. And the reason why we go over this stuff is because a lot of the stuff you learned over the past 3 years you need to know in Algebra 1. So the first lesson we're going to be looking at is called the order of operations. You might not have heard it called that. You might have heard a trick, which we'll go over shortly. But yes, we're going to call it the order of operations because we really want to say the language of the course we're in. So today's learning target is I can apply the order of operations to simplify an expression. So today what we're doing is we're simplifying expressions. Our goal is to only get one number as our final answer. So before we go any further, we need to talk about what the order of operations is. So what I'm going to tell you is there's this little thing in life where we have priorities. So for instance, one of my priorities, besides getting iced coffee every day, is to make sure that my rent is paid at the end of the month, that I keep in touch with friends, family, all that stuff. Those are some of my priorities. Oh, and I also go to graduate school, so I want to make sure that I finish my coursework. But in math, they have different priorities. And here's the priorities. We always do the priorities from first to last. So here are the priorities in math. Our priorities first are our parentheses. Then we deal with our exponents. Then we deal with multiplication and division. And then last but not least, we deal with addition and subtraction. And we do it in this direction. We always go up to down. We do our parentheses, then our exponents, our multiplication and our division, and our addition and subtraction. But here's the issue. We actually call the bottom two layers the see first, do first layer. So whichever you see first comes first. Whichever comes first, you do first. So if I see division before multiplication, I actually do my division first. If I see my subtraction before my addition, I do my subtraction first. The phrase that we often help and use to remember this pyramid is called PEMDAS. So that is what we're going to be writing in our notes right now. So on your PDF, what I am going to want to see is I want to see in this little blank space, PEMDAS. So I want to see the parentheses, the exponents, the multiplication, the division, the addition, and the subtraction. The P stands for parentheses, the E stands for exponents, the M stands for multiplication, the D stands for division, and the A and the S stand for addition and subtraction. Okay, so now here comes our model problem. Simplify 3 minus 2 squared minus 6 times 4 divided by 2 by using the order of operations. The first thing I do whenever I do these questions is I actually write out PEMDAS to the left. So I'm going to rewrite PEMDAS just like this. And then I'm going to rewrite the question. So I'm going to do 3 minus 2 squared minus 6 times 4 divided by 2. So when I do that, we need to ask ourselves, do I have parentheses? Yes, I have parentheses. They're right up in the front. So whatever you see in the parentheses is what you do first. So I have to ask myself, what is 3 minus 2? It's 1. So now I'm going to do 1 squared minus 6 times 4 divided by 2. So now I have to ask myself, do I have any exponents? Yeah, I do. I got that 1 squared. So I'm going to take care of it. What's 1 squared equal to? Well, it's 1 times 1, which is 1. So I now have 1 minus 6 times 4 divided by 2. Okay? Now I go to the next layer. I have to ask myself, do I have multiplication or division? I do. I have my multiplication first. So I'm now going to do 6 times 4. So I do 6 times 4, which is 24. So I have 1 minus 24 divided by 2. And the reason why it's a minus 24 is because that 6 was negative. I now ask myself, do I have division? And yes, I do. I have 24 divided by 2. So I do 24 divided by 2, which is 12. So I have 1 minus 12. And then I ask myself, what's 1 minus 12? It's negative 11. And that's your final answer. That is how you do PEMDAS. So if you're stuck, pause, rewind. But now we're going to go on to some examples. The first thing we do is we always say we have to rewrite PEMDAS. So PEMDAS. So I have 12 divided by 3 times 2 plus negative 1 plus 5 squared. I've got parentheses, so I got to do my parentheses first. So I say to myself, what's negative 1 plus 5? You guessed it, it's 4. So I have 4 squared. And then I have 12 divided by 3 times 2 plus that 4 squared. Next thing I have to do is I have to look, do I have an exponent? Yes, we have an exponent. It's the 4 squared. So here's how we do it. 4 times 4 is 16. So I have 12 divided by 3 times 2 plus 16. I have no more exponents. Now I need to ask myself, do I have multiplication and do I have division? I do have multiplication and division, but remember I said whatever you see first, you do first. I see my division first. So I'm going to do 12 divided by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. I now do times 2 plus 16. What's 4 times 2? It's 8. And then I add 16, which is 24. And that's your final answer. Now we go on to our next example. It looks a little more challenging because we have a number on the outside of our parentheses. The procedure is the exact same. I still do PEMDAS for PEMDAS, parenthesis, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. The first thing I ask myself, do I have parentheses? Yes, indeed. What's 3 minus 6? It's negative 3. So I have 8 minus 4 times 2 times a negative 3 plus 1. I still have parentheses. I have a 2 next to it. So whenever I have a 2 or a number next to my parentheses, I'm going to multiply. So I'm going to multiply my 2 and my negative 3. What is 2 times negative 3? You got it. It's negative 6. So I have 8 minus 4 times negative 6 plus 1. I need to ask myself, do I have multiplication or division? I've got multiplication. I've got negative 4 times negative 6. Negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24. So I have 8 plus 24 plus 1. Now all I have left is addition and addition. So I can actually just add all these numbers up together at once. 8 plus 24 is 32. And then 32 plus 1 is 33. That's your final answer. Let's go on to the next expression. Ooh, I see a fraction. I have an issue. Here's how we approach. When you have fractions, we're just going to take it piece by piece. So I'm still going to have a numerator and denominator, but I'm only going to focus on one part at a time. So I'm going to draw my fraction bar, and I'm going to look back at my original. Do I have parentheses? I do, but inside my parentheses is a 2 cubed minus 1. So I have to ask myself, in terms of PEMDAS, inside that parenthesis, what am I dealing with? I'm dealing with the 2 cubed minus 1. I know that 2 cubed is really 2 times 2 times 2. What's 2 times 2? 4 times another 2, 8. So I'm really doing 8 minus 1. So what we're going to do in our numerator of our expression is write out 7 times 8 minus 1 plus 1. We're not going to focus on the bottom part of our expression. We're just going to focus on our numerator. Now, I'm going to look at my parentheses. I have an 8 minus 1. Well, 8 minus 1 is 7. So I'm going to do 7 times 7 plus 1. And we know 7 times 7 is 49. So I'm going to do 49 plus 1, which is 50. So right now I have a 50 in my numerator. In my denominator, I have a 10 minus 3 squared. So this is really 10 minus 9, because I have 3 times 3 is 9. So I have a 10 minus 9 in my denominator. I still have my 10 minus 9. 10 minus 9, you can rewrite it, or you can just write 10 minus 9 as 1. So 50 divided by 1 is 50. That's your final answer. Just give me a heads up. If you can do this, you can do anything. Let's go on to the next part. So now what we're going to look at is evaluating expression. So expression or expression is a phrase in which at least one operation needs to be performed. So I'm just giving you the heads up. The parentheses police are coming in. Every time you plug in a number, we need to put parentheses around them. So when we do this, we call it the air freshener game. So for instance, if your room stinks, you plug in some air freshener and we just plug it in, plug it in. So here's how it's going to work. Always, always, always hug your negative numbers. Whenever someone's sad, you give them a hug. So we need to make sure everything is being hugged. Personally, I like to hug happy people. I like to hug sad people. So when I'm plugging in my numbers, I like to make sure everything's got a parentheses around them. Here's the thing. This is what we do. Whenever evaluating an expression and plugging in that negative number, you got to wrap it. You got to wrap it in parentheses. So to be safe, just wrap every single number you plug in with parentheses. So what we're going to be doing is evaluating each of the following expressions. Here's the deal. You're going to look and you really don't see that many numbers. You just see variables. You see an A, a D, a B, a D, a Y, a B, and an A, and then another A, B, D. So I'm telling you, every day, right now, A's got to be -8, B's got to be 6, D is -3, X is 4, Y is 5, and Z is -1. So for this series of questions, that is what these values are. Later on, they can be something else, but right now, these are the values. So for our first example, we have A squared times D. So whenever you have variables next to each other without any operation, that means you're going to be multiplying. So if I go back to my question, I'm dealing with the variables A and D. So if I go back to my question, the value of A is -8 and the value of D is -3. Those are the numbers I'm plugging in. So everywhere I see an A, I substitute a -8. But remember what I said, we gotta wrap it in parentheses because the parentheses police are coming to town. And now I plug in my D, which I said was -3. And here's the best part. You just type it in your calculator. I don't need to see anything else. If you want, you could try to do your mental math. Let's do some mental math right now. We know -8 squared is 64. So I'm just doing 64 times -3, which is -192. And that's your final answer. So this is what you would see on the regions. This is what you would see on a test. This is just to really make sure that you know how to evaluate an expression. Now let's go on to the next part. If you want, you can try this by yourself and sort of zone me out while this is playing. But now we have B squared minus D squared. So we still have a D value, but we're now plugging in B. If you look at the question, B is 6. So I'm going to plug in a 6 for B. And I'm going to square it. I'm going to do my subtraction. And we said before that D was -3. And I'm still going to square it. So if you want, you can do the arithmetic in your head. 6 squared is 36. -3 squared is +9, but this minus carries weight, so it's going to be -9. What's 36 minus 9? You got it. It's 27. Now let's go on to the next one. This one looks like a beast. I've got y squared minus 4y plus b minus a. So we got a different variable this time. We got a y. If you look back at the question, y is 5. So everywhere I see a y, I substitute a 5. But remember, we got to wrap it in parentheses because the parentheses police are in town. So I have 5 squared minus 4 times 5 plus, we now need to do what b minus a is. We said b was 6 and a was negative 8. So I have 6 minus a negative 8. So if you're doing it by hand, let's do it by hand. 6 minus a negative 8 is 14. 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. What's 25 minus 20? It's 5. And then 5 plus 14 is 19. That is your final answer. Now I'm going to ask that you do the next question completely by yourself. So once you did that question by yourself, you should have done negative 8 plus 6 squared minus a negative 3 squared. Even though this negative 3 squared comes out to 9, you need to make sure that you carry this sign with it. Perfect. That was today's lesson. So here's your next task. Your next task is to practice what you learned today. You need to go to Delta Math. You should have already created your Delta Math last week. If you have any questions, please email myself, Miss Townsend, or Miss Jimenez. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us. Have a great day, ladies.